So I first read this book on a flight from Atlanta last year when you first came out with the book. And it's such an incredible story about partnership and building businesses and enterprise and about making change in this country. And I thought, we got to tell this story at Women in Worth. So there's a lot you know about the ladies on the stage and a lot I think you don't know. So I wanted to start by just giving a little background on your friendship.
So he would ask a question, I would raise my hand, he would look me in the eye and call on someone else. And I thought, does he not say, I look like a kindergartner. Hello, you're not calling on me. Meanwhile, he would not stop calling on Stacey. And she didn't have her hand up. In fact, she kept looking at him like, leave me alone. Why are you calling on me? And so as he pushed her more and more to share something she would never share, she finally shared. He broke her down and she said, I want to be president of the United States someday. And I thought, oh, I want to be president of the United States someday. Women don't say that in public. I have to meet this woman. So we broke for lunch 5 minutes later. And I just told you I'm an extrovert. I accosted her at the buffet line. I'm sure she was thinking, who is this over-caffeinated woman that's all in my space? And we ended up in the same study group, working on large-scale projects for Atlanta for the next year. At the end of the program, I was pregnant with my son and decided to leave my job to start something so I would have the flexibility to be a great mom. And I said, you're the smartest person I've ever met. We should do something together. She said, well, you're pretty smart too. We should do something together.
She's a rocket scientist, just understand
yes,
the self-deprecation.
She really is actually a rocket scientist.
Yeah. And so then we said, what should we do? And I think the lesson in that is, if you have an amazing partner, if you have two amazing people, the idea can be even average. A great idea with average people has less a chance of success than great people.
So you're both problem solvers.
We are.
And the first company that you started was a consulting firm together, Insomnia Consulting, which you have to tell us about that name in a second. But I want to talk about the partnership that you formed and how you kind of determined how you were going to work together with that company. You often refer to yourselves as yes, but. Wait, you're yes, you're but. That's right. And I really love how you many times throughout the book talk about the division of labor and how you kind of capitalize on each other's expertise. Stacey, if you want to share a little bit.
So as Lara pointed out, we have wildly divergent personalities. And we also we had different politics, we had different backgrounds, but we have a common belief in doing good. And we had a common interest in trying to develop something that could solve problems. We also, neither of us slept very much. And so the company actually came into being because we would call each other or write each other at 2 a.m. because we weren't sleeping, so we called the company Insomnia. Because we're also very inventive. But we said we solve the problems that keep you up at night. And when we started, because Lara is she's never met a stranger, and I have many times, she was much more aggressive about going out to get work. I will do all of the work I can. I'm less inclined to ask you to hire me. I like paychecks. I was very happy being employed, but I was running for office, and the job I had as deputy city attorney, I decided I couldn't stay in that job. And so when we created the company, the goal was to solve these problems. I had one client, so I had a consulting firm before Lara and I started, but I had one client, and then I was like, well, I guess I should have two. But I didn't know who to ask, so I just didn't. And then Lara was like, we should work together. I'm like, oh God, you talk to people, that's fantastic. And that was one of the benefits of partnership. She had a skill set that I didn't have, and she had a willingness to leverage that skill set. And so our agreement was, we were both going to do the work, and no matter who brought in who landed the gig, we were equally responsible, but sometimes it would be something I would do more of. So I do a lot of writing. So we did a case study for NASA. I did the bulk of the writing. We did a real estate project. That was her expertise. And so we never really counted up hours for each other because we knew that depending on the project, one of us might have to do more than the other. And so we split everything 50-50, but we had what we called a promote. And that was that whoever landed the gig got 15%. So it was 50-50, but you got the promote. And it was fine because one, it meant that we weren't fighting over or nitpicking about who got what. We didn't have to keep track of hours because we both work in very different ways. She had Connor at home. I had a capital full of people who were bothering me. And so if we had to keep account of hours or if we were ticking who did what, you start to resent one another. But by setting the parameters early and writing it down, like we actually had an agreement. And it wasn't just that we were friends. I mean, I made her husband sign an NDA before we started one of our companies. But it feels sometimes in partnership and in business structures, you feel that you're doing some disservice. You're not trusting your partner. The best trust of your partner is that you can be honest with each other about your expectations. And so we set our expectations early. We would revisit them as we needed to. But I knew I didn't want to do the hard work of finding the clients. She did not want to do the hard work of dunning the clients when they didn't want to pay us. And so that was my job. But the other piece was we never fought over which title we got. I was very happy being COO. I believed in the operations. She was fantastic CEO. And because we both know ourselves well enough, we didn't need the titles to tell us who we were. The titles helped other people understand how to deal with us. And sometimes we internalize our need to be validated by the title we ascribe ourselves. But when in partnership, if you think about it ahead of time, you realize, I've demonstrated I can lead stuff. I didn't have to have that title in that space to make it so. And Lara didn't need to tell people that she knew how to run stuff or how to be an operator. She knew that I could be the COO and that this was something I could do. And so I think the most important piece for us was that we were intentional in our decisions. We were anticipatory. We figured out what things were we going to fight about later. So when I made you guys take the pictures, it's that part of it is just thinking through, don't pretend things aren't. Know that things are and figure out how you will solve them and solve them before they become a crisis. Solve them when they're just an idea.
So along those lines, you've had many challenging conversations in your partnership, and which I love, and I love that you're not afraid to sit down and like have these difficult conversations and hash things out. But there's a particular story you talked about where you went to a potential client meeting, and you're all sitting at the table with a group of men, and after that meeting, you got in the car and had this very intense conversation. Stacey, will you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think it's really telling, and it's an important story to share.
So it was not just a conversation with men, it was a conversation with white men. So we were invited and we did infrastructure consulting work, which was not an area that women were often in. And so we worked with C.B. Richard Ellis, we did work on the largest zinc mine in the world. We did a lot of really complex infrastructure projects. And we were invited to Houston to meet with the team. And when we walked in the room, I think they were just surprised that they brought women in the first place. But we walk in the room together. Our names are on, we both have cards. Our names are on the agenda, but they only talk to Lara. And anytime there was a question, if I started to interject, they would turn to Lara to get her to validate what I said. I'm fairly certain one of them wanted me to get them coffee. And it just kept happening, and I just shut down because I'm an introvert, but also this was an area that I was confident in my capacity, but in that space, it was very clear that they had no interest in my opinion. And Lara kept answering questions because Lara solves problems. So we're trying to land a client, and she's doing her job, which is getting us money. And in that space, the most important thing was to land the client. But when we got in the car, she said, she was asking what I thought about it, and I was circumspect.
Quieter than usual. Yeah.
And she pushed me because that's what she knows to do. And I explained, I said, Lara, you realize that not a single one of those men directly addressed me. And she hadn't really noticed it because we often think about the discrimination or the issue that we're used to facing. So Lara enters a space knowing that as a woman in these very rarefied spaces, there is an issue with gender. She had never had to confront the issue of race. And I didn't have the luxury of parsing it out. And so we had a really, I wouldn't say it was awkward, but it was an intentional conversation about how we had to present me, because I had to be validated as a woman and a Black person and a Black woman, those are three different things. in a space that didn't accept utility of any of those. But having a business partner I could talk to about it, and it wasn't a complaint, it was an issue, because if we didn't address it, we might lose opportunities. I may say something inappropriate to someone about their upbringing, and then we could lose a client. So it was a good opportunity. And often when we get used to one of our issues being the thing, we forget to acknowledge that there are other dimensions to difference, and it's our responsibility to create space. And what I appreciate about Lara was that she didn't know what the problem was, but she knew there was a problem and she wasn't going to let it go.
I think the other thing is, Stacey and I often say, be curious first, critical second. And that's usually the opposite in the world today. In the world today, we usually see something and we immediately judge, we're immediately critical. She could have looked at me and said, why didn't you notice, right? She could have immediately jumped to judgment about my lack of awareness of the issue, but she didn't. She was curious first. Did you notice, right? I didn't. And that was this amazing conversation around how do we, going forward, prevent that from happening again? So I think that's just a lesson for all of us. We're always confronted with someone who sees something differently, doesn't see something that we think they should, but before we immediately judge and criticize, be curious first, because there's an opportunity for growth.
Well, and I think all of this lessons learned, but also the fact that you were able to talk through all of this. And I know often people say that you have such differing opinions on so many things, and yet you've had this very successful business partnership for 20-something years. So, that is a really key thing for women, that we can communicate and be honest with each other and work through these difficult situations and make sure we're aware of the needs of our business partners and what's happening in the rooms around us. It led to you're developing some other things within your companies, but I'm going to keep going because we're getting short on time. So the consulting practice is doing great, but you're both exhausted. I mean, insomnia consulting is like you're burning the candle at both ends. So there's a meeting that takes place and you have this aha moment over lunch over how to start a company that makes money while you sleep. So wait, tell us a little bit about that really quickly.
Well, the meeting, it was actually a campaign meeting as Stacey was running for office. And I came running in with my child in a carrier. To say that I was complaining would be very polite. He had spilled stuff everywhere. I had formula down the front of my dress. I was not happy about it. I sort of slumped into the seat. And I was like, somebody has got to create a spill-proof bottled water for kids. And I was really just venting. She thought I was brainstorming. So, after I vented and we continued on with the meeting, she just was like, why don't we do it? And it kind of brought to a head that we were working. If you are in a consulting role like we were, your unit of value is time. And that's not scalable. And we had always dreamed of what could we do that we could make money while we sleep. And so my pain of toting a spilling toddler around became our inspiration for, could we do something that made money while we sleep? Now, the amazing thing is, so we created a company called Nourish. It's a spill-proof bottled water for children. Neither one of us came from that background. And I really do believe that your greatest ideas come from the demand side, not the supply side. We saw a problem, we didn't know the answer, so we tackled the answer.
And in the book, which you all should read, they get into great detail about supply chain, distribution, product development, the men in the room and their vendors, the men at the table, the conversations. It's fascinating. You really do have to read it, but we're not going to talk about it now. We're going to jump on and we're going to talk about how Nourish got to a point where it was very successful. They were doing so well. They had orders coming in and they landed Whole Foods. And it was that moment where the next aha happened. So tell us a little bit about that.
This is the yes, but. So we get a call from Whole Foods. They want they want a truckload. She's like, yes. And I'm like, but. To fill a truckload, we had to automate our equipment. And to automate our equipment, we had to have money, and we didn't have any. Because while we were doing well, we had not yet reached profitability. And so we started trying to find the money. We had an invoice worth about twice the amount it would take us to automate, but no one would loan us the money, even though we could prove we had a product that was successful and we had a customer that would pay, even though the pay was net, it's a net 30, which meant net 90, which often for a small business means net never. And everyone we needed to help us to meet the order, we were already owed them money because we were still waiting from the last Whole Foods invoice. And Whole Foods is not unusual in this. It's true, as you all know, across almost every supplier. I mean, every buyer, we're the best. I mean, small businesses, we are their credit. And so Lara and I realized after being told no multiple times, we went from bank to credit union to mattress hunting. Apparently we didn't have enough under our mattresses, and we ended up with a factoring company. And we actually went all the way through the process, and the credit scoring model changed, and we got kicked out at the very last minute. And so we had to say no to the Whole Foods opportunity because we simply, even though we had twice the amount of money available on the invoice, no one would loan us the money to meet it. And so to Lara's point about the demand side, we were like, this is stupid. How is it that we have something that's worth twice what we need and we can't monetize it? And so we created NOW Account.
So what you were saying is 64% of small businesses in 2001 reported that their invoices went unpaid for at least 60 days. So what happens is that small business in America is actually the biggest lender out there right now. So small businesses are tapping themselves out, struggling, to make this all happen. And you guys have come up with an incredible solution for small business. So please tell us about NOW and what it's all about and how it's helping.
Well, as Stacey said, we were really lamenting the fact that we couldn't get access to capital. People would tell us, you don't have a high-tech startup. It's just a beverage company. You can't make money at that. We were in Atlanta, Georgia. Coca-Cola was right behind us. I think you can make money as a beverage company. I mean, Mrs. Fields makes cookies. And so as we were looking and everyone was telling us, oh, you just have a working capital issue. Everybody has that. No invoices pay on time. You should go borrow money or try factoring. And Stacey and I were like, back up a minute. What do you mean everybody has this problem? If everyone has a problem, the existing solutions don't work. And so we because we like to break things apart and put them together, we looked at everything that existed in the market and we started to break it into its pieces. And we were sitting at lunch one day and all of a sudden we were like, wait a minute, this restaurant never waits to get paid. That is so unfair. But if you think about it, I'm going to age myself now, restaurants used to wait to get paid. Because when I was a little girl, my dad would get paid, my mother would go pay the Thrift Town bill, and she would go pay the Riches bill, and she would go pay the bill at the restaurant down the street. But the credit card system changed all of that. And we were like, wow, well, if this restaurant can just take a credit card and not have to borrow money, let's do the same thing. So we called Whole Foods and said, just pay us with a credit card. Be great. We could pay our suppliers. You can deal with that later. And they said, no, thank you. Because if we pay you with a card, we now owe the bank. And if you don't pay your card on its due date, what happens? Penalties, interest. If you don't pay someone's net 30 invoice on the 30th day, what happens? Nothing.
Begging and whining.
Begging and whining, yes. So the way NOW Account works, we created the first ever payment system that if you're a small business and you deliver your business or service to a government or another business, and they're willing to give you a credit card, you should take it and run. But if they're not, and they say, no, we want an invoice, you can put it on your NOW account. You get paid the full amount of the invoice immediately minus a one-time merchant fee of about 3%. Feels exactly like someone handed you a Visa. It's not on your balance sheet. You have no loan, no factoring, no financing of anything. You can grow your business exponentially. Your customer still gets the invoice. They still pay when they feel like it. They still make the check or the wire out to you, but it goes to our lockbox. So nothing changes for your customer. And people look at us and they're like, neither one of you are bankers. How in the world did you come up with this? Bankers are too smart. They're too smart. They know too much. And the greatest ideas come when you don't know the way things have always been done. We didn't know. So we asked the really dumb questions, and they're the best.
So I just want to wrap all this up by saying that with all that they were doing, Stacey's writing novels. She's written 15 books, serving 11 years in the state legislature, running for governor. Laura's got 2 young kids. She's also working with the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority, so they both are involved in politics. they still managed to build 3 companies together. And this one currently is thriving. It's doing really well. Can I talk about the new announcement you had? So Goldman Sachs just
We just did a $225 million facility with Goldman Sachs through the one. Yep. And it's through their 1 Million Black Women program. So our goal is to get that money in the hands of women and minority businesses to help them scale.
But even though that's what the facility is for, the entity is for everyone. So if you have ever had a hard time getting someone to pay you, check out NOW account. We got you.
And tell your friends, please tell everyone who's got a small business that needs help. These ladies are here to solve the problem. Thank you both so much. We truly appreciate it.